Welcome to the inner world of filmmaking. I'm your host, Tammy McGarrow. I'm an editor, podcaster, and still photographer. In this show, I will interview filmmakers in all facets of production and distribution. We will be exploring the world of the feature film editor with guest Lex Benedict. She has edited 11 feature films in a wide variety of projects, which also includes short films, music videos, unscripted television, and more. She's also a cinematographer and digital VFX artist. Welcome, Lex. Happy to have you on the show today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Again, it's so nice to talk to an editor. I could do this every day, just have coffee and talk shop.
I know. I should have done that. Like, let's bring our coffees.
I always have my coffee.
Nice. So I wanted to dive in because you're originally from Florida. You've moved to LA, for a while now. And what led you into filmmaking and in particular editing and then moving to LA?
Well, in high school, I was always into doing the morning announcements and doing whatever video production classes were available to me, tape-to-tape editing. And then I went to college and I was like, how can I channel my art into a career? Underwater basket weaving was not an option. So I started to do art therapy classes and then quickly realized that I was too much of an empath to continue down that path with my own mental health. I just kind of switched to doing film. I got my first camera that was mini DV, and I started just as a hobby, practicing on the weekends, shooting my friends skateboarding, shooting my friends surfing. Being from Panama City Beach, it's beautiful beaches that we like to keep a secret, but there's lots of interesting characters to shoot. So I was just really exploring. I never really thought I could be a filmmaker. I didn't come from any artist in my family. I was a military brat. So it was more of just a hobby to start out with. And then I met my husband, who I've been married to for 20 years, and he made films on the weekends with his friends at college. So we got married within like a year and a half. And I took over the editing because I just couldn't stop. I'm a little bit OCD. And as soon as I learned an editing program on his PC, I was hooked. I was out back, videotaping slugs and doing romance stories just to practice and teaching myself. This was right when Final Cut 5 came out, so studio. So it was the first time that amateurs had access to all this power, and I was obsessed. I was really badly composing on GarageBand. I was trying to make albums with my friends, just exploring what that looked like. And then I guess in 2004, I did Rock the Vote videos for MTV. You could do a random spot and send it in, and it never aired, but that kind of cemented I'm a filmmaker. What does this look like? How do I go into the community and provide this service and get better at my skill set with my little camera and my computer at home? And it was all bad. It was all bad for the first 5 years, but I learned a ton, and I suggest that to any new filmmaker is get a camera and make really bad stuff for 5 years. I still make bad stuff. You kind of have to do that to get better,
Right.
So that's how I started filmmaking. And then my husband was in the Navy and he got stationed in San Diego, and we moved out to California. And he got out in 2010, and the Navy pays for your move. And we were like, are we going back to Florida or what are we doing? And I was still doing indie film stuff, making short films, but not I was getting paid sometimes, but not in a super professional capacity. And wasn't ready to say I am a professional filmmaker yet. And he was like, well, let's move to LA. We have no money. We had some money saved, but let's move to LA. Let's get the Navy to pay for our move to LA. And let's just see what happens. We're in our 30s. We're not just young kids anymore. We know our marriage. We have a good, secure marriage. We didn't have kids. We had an old dog. It just seemed like a good time in our life to start our next career. And so we moved here with no connections in 2010, and we're still here.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And, so since then, you've edited 11 feature films. That's a lot.
Yep. Actually, I'm coming up on my 15th this year.
15. Okay. Wow. 15 films.
Woo!
Yes. So I'm curious, like over the years of editing from the first feature to now, what is expected from the editor? I mean, do you have to know color grading, sound mixing, music composing, or it varies? Tell us.
Actually, that's how I kind of slipped into feature film editing is I learned every skill I could. I learned Apple Color right when it first came out. This is before DaVinci. It was node-based color program that was really cool and was with Final Cut before Final Cut went over to 10 and before Premiere kind of like took over the indie filmmaking program to have. And I learned After Effects. It was literally a sink or swim type job where they were like, I got hired for this small editing job, and they were like, hopefully you have After Effects skills too. And I'm like, of course I have After Effects skills. And then all night I was on YouTube and some 11-year-old in like Denmark was teaching me how to do this After Effects skill.
Right.
And there were some tears shed and some sleepless nights, but eventually I learned all the skill sets that I had lied and said that I had.
Right.
And then I shined on that job and got promoted and started doing longer form content, but also still was doing graphics and color correction. And there's always some level of sound mix that you do. I over the last 15 years, rough cuts have changed immensely. Like when some of my first rough cuts go out, it's basically a string out for the director to watch, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's more of like a starting place. Every rough cut is for you and the director to start a conversation. But now that I've been doing it so long, my first cut that goes out is a viewable movie that you could screen with the producers, even off the first cut. I put temp music in. I do a temp visual effects for placeholders. Basically, my first cut is as close as I can get to the movie on the page without elevating it to the next level. So that's been the biggest change, I think, in editing feature films was like my first rough cuts were really string outs. And now my first rough cuts, I know what they're looking for. And I want them to be excited. I think the first time I showed a string out to a director and the movie was bad and she started crying. And I was like, no, this is just the first step. And I never wanted to have that feeling again where the director was sad about their project. I was like, this is a victory. It is so hard to make a movie, especially an independent film. And you did it. And we're going to fix all these problems. Stop crying.
Right.
So now I try to polish it as much as I can without changing the story.
Right.
Because there's always going to be a point that you're like, okay, we shot this scene. We thought we needed it. And now it makes the film longer than it needs to be. How can we cut this down? Does this add anything? I don't do those things until the second and third cut with the director. So that is kind of the only thing that I don't polish out of the first cut and I get time for the first cut. I always ask for a good 4 weeks to really massage it and play with it if there's time.
So what I think you just said is in the first cut, you're keeping in all the scenes, even though you might go, we could lose that one because you don't want the director to go, where's that scene?
Yeah. And then I'll just have to show them and do double the work. So I'd
Right.
rather just do it, show them, and then kind of let them have that epiphany. Kind of lead the horse to water as much as you can and show them. Because, egos are a very sensitive thing. And especially if somebody is the writer and director, you don't want to kill their baby. You want to help them kill their baby.
Yes. So how do you guide them? I mean, how do you work with a director?
So I have done it several ways. I have had the director come and sit with me and tap me on the shoulder when they're ready to cut between a scene. And I have told them to stop that. And I have had, movies that were so completely remote that were maybe meeting once every cut and just like walking through it and talking about it, and then I'll go in and make the changes. It's really about trust and how other people work. I try to, when I get hired, ask the director, how do you like to work? Do you want me to come in and, give you a fresh look on it, or, fresh eyes on the project? Or do you want me to edit it exactly like the script? Do you already have ideas? And also send me everything. Like the earlier I can come on your project, I don't want to come on the first draft of the script. But once you've locked, even if you've not like locked the shooting script because you don't have locations and you haven't cast yet, bring on your editor. Even if you can just pay them for a week before, so that you guys can kind of make a plan. And especially with visual effects and phones and text messages being on screen so much now in film, like bring your editor on so that you guys can make a plan for those things, so it doesn't like surprise you in post where you're like, oh, I wanted a text message to pop up there, and you're like, but where? Or like on your face? Like, where did you want that to go? And if you just bring your editor on in pre-pro, you guys can map that out and actually elevate some ideas before you shoot. So I really try to ask the director, what do you want from me? What does your work environment look like? How do you like to work? What's your love language for work? How do you like me to contact you? Is it in the middle of the night with text? Is it an email? Is it a Zoom meeting? Literally, what is your love language as a director in terms of workflow? And some people don't know, because you got to remember, a director might direct a feature film once every 2 years, once every 7 years.
Right.
And I'm editing 5 features a year or some level of that. And so, you kind of got to step back and be like, I'm in the co-pilot seat, even though I do this more, and figure out how to communicate, which is every relationship. So, but yeah, I definitely love remote work. I love being able to kind of like submerge myself in the project, and then the director coming on and us going through it, or coming over, whichever works. But I definitely like to go at it by myself first and kind of figure it out and get to know everything.
Yeah. So, and I think that that's wise. If you're going to hire an editor, they should get the first pass at it, and I've also heard that, probably is a good idea to keep it to the script. And then from there you can move scenes. But, a lot of times directors want to see exactly how it was supposed to be in their head.
As linear as possible.
Yeah. Right. So can you just describe for people who may not know a string out, and what does that look like, and what does that mean, and is that different from the assembly edit?
Okay. Yeah. So when I set up a project, sometimes I have an assistant. Feature films, indie feature films with a low budget under $1 million, you sometimes will get enough to have a assistant editor for 2 to 3 weeks. And usually I'll break that up to helping me organize and sync the audio if that hasn't happened, based on how they did the audio on set. Hopefully they slated, hopefully they had a track for you to match or something.
Right.
So I'll bring on an assistant and pay them for 2 weeks, and then I'll bring on an assistant for the third week at the end to turn over the project. So I will have an assistant for some time on 50% of the projects. Other times it's just me. So I'll usually get a hard drive in the mail, or a courier will drop it off, and I'll bring it in and I edit in Premiere Pro, just because I love the Adobe suite. You just have everything. And I've been doing it for 10 years. And again, I'm old school and don't like change. I can't edit in Avid. Avid's great too. Actually, Premiere is more like Avid now. You can set both of them up either way. So I don't care what you edit in. Just give me a razor. But I use Premiere Pro because I do a lot of Adobe After Effects with my projects. I'll bring in all the footage by day, and I'll set up dailies, because a lot of times independent film projects don't have money to have a house doing dailies. So usually you don't get your dailies until after the editor gets it. And everybody does things differently, but I'll lay everything out by day. I'll sync everything by day, and then I'll time code and upload to Vimeo or Frame.io everyday dailies. I want the director to have access to everything they shot. I don't want to be the only person with that information.
Right.
And hard drives and watching footage is hard. Not every computer can watch 8K red footage. So I don't expect a director to have an editing setup at home. It would be nice. But I do. So I give dailies of every day for 18 days or 25 days. And I upload those in the first 2 weeks.
Okay, so with the dailies, are you taking out the take 1, take 2, and just giving them the cuts, or you're doing it from start to finish of that? Not
Start
trimming.
to finish. Start to finish. That's their camera team's department to clean up before action and after action. I used to even cut down sequences where we're going to do a series of takes in this. And I'd be like, oh, this is the best one. And now I'm like, nope, if I have to go through it, y'all have to go through it.
Right.
So
Okay.
And most teams are pretty professional. So that's not a problem. But yes, I will have everything there, even some weird BTS that you didn't know you were recording.
Oh, okay.
And I just time code it. And so I'll send that out to the directors, and then I'll come back in, and hopefully you have a script supervisor. And I will go through and I will pull selects from all of the takes that you marked as their favorites. And I will pull those into bins. And so I will have all my dailies, which is everything from every day. And then I'll have everything broken down by scenes. And then I'll have those scenes broken down by selects from the script supervisor. And that's how I start the assembly.
Okay, and you're doing the assembly based on the favorite takes, then not on everything.
Nope. I will watch everything down as I'm pulling the selects, and I will be making notes, and I have a document for myself that's like, I really love how the actor says this here. And even though this is what we liked on set, show the director this later. You know? Because a lot of times directors, there's so much going on that a director has to handle. It might feel like the best take when they're there, but I really suggest to watch everything, even the stuff that you said was bad, because you can find just like gems all over the place.
Right.
So I start, for the sake of time, I start with the selects that the script supervisor marked as the director's favorites.
Okay.
But I watch everything so that I know when we go into the edit if we have anything better.
So when you're watching, are you putting it on a assembly, like on a timeline that you put everything for that day synced with the audio, and you just sit down and grab a bag of popcorn and then just start watching? You don't fast forward through it. You don't do it on double time. You just like watch the whole 2 hours.
Everything. Yeah. Because I'll even steal a reaction. I'll steal before or at the end. Like, give your actors a second to breathe after they finish their line.
Right.
You know? So yeah, I will watch everything, and I'll mark it. Premiere has a great system for marking and putting notes, and I love color. All my timelines are very color infused. I'm like, Lex is pink, you're green.
I love it. Well, that helps you to keep track too.
Yep. And then when I go through, especially I use color coordinated timelines, especially on the first and second cuts, because I will color coordinate, like the first selects will be green, and those are my selects. And then the alt takes I'll have in like cerulean. So when I'm going back through my second cut, you can see, oh, we changed out this from the select, and this is actually an alt take that we didn't pick, but now we realize this is better than the take we selected. And so it's kind of cool to go back and see how the cut changes from the selects you pick on set versus what ends up in the edit, which is a kaleidoscope of color.
It'd be nice if it's like, well, they're all my color choices.
I know. Told ya.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So then you're organizing the bin by day, then within by day scenes.
Yeah.
So, and then you're doing your kind of assembly edit of everything synced with the audio, but then you do another bin of a timeline probably too with the best takes from that.
Yep.
Okay. And then, so do you go through everything and then start the rough cut, or are you cutting after you've seen all the scenes and then you're starting to put it together?
Yep. After I see everything, I will start and I pull the selects. I will edit. I will string out each scene with the selects in their own bin. And then once I get to 101 scene, then I'll combine everything and throw it on the timeline finally and be like, oh, it's our movie.
Okay.
And that just feels good. It feels like if I start building it as I go with the scenes, I feel like I'm not getting much of a reward. It just seems like an impossible task. So if I finish a scene, I'm like, victory, I finished a scene. Look at my pretty timeline. And then when I put all of the scenes finally at the end of editing all the scenes on a master timeline and you see your movie for the first time, you can like go have a 4-day weekend.
Right.
And celebrate. So I like that. That's my favorite moment that I celebrate, is having a first string out assembly of the entire film, because you're like, oh, I have something.
Right. So, so then you are doing that then. So after, I'm just trying to get clear on the time frame of it. So once you do, like, let's just say it's day 2, right? Okay. So you have your bit of day 2, it's scene, whatever, and then you do your string out. So the string out is based on the favorite, but you actually don't just put it like an assembly. You are cutting it together as a scene.
Yep. I do in and out points on my selects and pull them in. And I'm like, okay, I usually start with the wide select.
Yep.
And then I'll do mostly close-ups for that first assembly, because you are getting the most emotion out of cutting to the close-up.
Okay.
For just the assembly, for talking points. Like, I know I'm going to go back and cut to the medium to show this crossing across the scene in the room. But for right now, I just cut it in close-ups because that's where my emotion lives. So I do, even though it's a rough string out of the selects, it's usually the wide and the close-ups.
Okay.
To start with.
Okay. And then, okay, audio can get so daunting. I mean, you could have like 7 layers of audio for that. Do you start deleting out some of those and then do you work off the law of the boom? Do you pick the best? Do you use the mix? Like, talk me through that.
So I will leave all of the audio, even whatever the on-cam audio was, because I have had movies where that has sometimes been better for whatever reason. So I will leave everything just in case, just to save me time later for searching for my audio person.
And then redoing it. Oh.
Yeah, and I will. And when I send it to him, I'm like, hey, I'm sending you like 36 levels, because I temp sound effects and temp music and everything. And so I work with the same audio post people a lot. So we have a good workflow that we've like figured out, but they know that I will send everything. I'm like, just in case you need this is here. Now for my master screeners that go out, I do a mix. So I will mute bad laws, but I won't delete anything. I'll just, either bring the volume down or unenable them is the easiest way in Premiere, because a lot of people, audio sound wise, are like, please don't mute stuff and send it to me. So I will go through and pick, and most of the time it's lav, I guess. I want to say. Which I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, can you fix this? I'm like, no, I'm just the editor.
Right. Yeah. So then typically it does go out, like you do some mixing, and some sound effects and coloring, but does it ever go out to a colorist and then they're like, please don't? Or
no, usually the colorist has such a short amount of time, and usually is the end of the budget, that they want to know the temp color that you and the director and the DP and the DIT already decided. Again, the earlier you can bring on your team and decide these things, the easier it is for post later. So a lot of times the DP is already deciding what we want the color to look like overall, and then the colorist is getting to be an artist in some form, but a lot of times ends up just fixing things. And unless you're like, I have this really cool dream sequence and you can do whatever.
Yeah.
Or I'm doing one right now that has a snake POV. And so the colorist is getting to have a fun time kind of creating what a snake POV looks like in color. So, but yeah, we definitely send it out to the colorist, and they definitely are like, please send us a reference to make it easier for us.
I like that. So what is the editor, or your toolkit? Like, what computer do you use? Monitors? What's your setup?
I'm on an iMac. I ended up not going with a Pro so that I could add my own memory to it and try to kit it up as much as possible. I'm editing on G drives or OWC RAIDs, which are my favorite. I have 2 monitors right now, and I also have an iPad that I will pull up for my script references and just having extra real estate.
How big are your monitors?
I'm guessing that's a good question. This is a 27-inch and a 29-inch.
All right.
Yeah. And I used to have a big one up on the wall for the director, but I kept thinking it was going to fall on me if we had an earthquake. And so I was like, that has to go. It's stressing me out. And then I have a 4K one that I will roll in for 4K screening because a lot of stuff is selling in UHD now. And you kind of got to plan for that too, because that costs more to color in 4K versus 1080. So I will bring in a 4K monitor and say, okay, we got to decide, are we mastering in 1080 or 4K?
Yeah.
Hopefully hopefully the director knows.
Right.
But, yeah. So
that also goes to timeline. What is your sequence? What is your settings? I mean, are you doing for 4K settings or do you do 1920 by 1080 like HD?
I edit raw.
Okay.
I
so
try
everything
to keep
is
everything
full.
raw. Yeah. I did just recently do the Snake project was an 8K red, and that was choking at my system. So I did make proxies. But even my proxies, I kept at 4K so I could send out good screeners.
Wow.
And it's nice to see everything. Sometimes if you send out a very, I've worked on reality shows where you're watching like 1-to-1 and you're like, I can't even see if this person is talking or, or am I going to have to do skin cleanup or beauty work on this feature? Like if I send it out like a 720 or a 540, people are like, this is beautiful. I'm like, no. Let me send this out as 4K and then let's adjust.
Right. Now, do you work on one project at a time or do you have several going? And
I think that just because I'm an independent editor and a people pleaser who can't say no, and I love helping my friends, and honestly, some of the projects that you say yes to that you think you don't have the time for end up being some of my favorites because you're just weren't expecting it or didn't put as much planning into it. And then you're like, oh, I got this new project. And you're like, oh, this is great. I have like 8 projects right now that I'm balancing.
Okay, so walk me through time management. Is it like Monday is this project, Tuesday, or do you put timers on and go, okay, 2 hours and I switch into this? What do you do?
I do a before lunch project and an after lunch project. So usually my before lunch projects are New York time or East Coast projects. And then lunch, we'll have a Zoom meeting or an edit session. And then at like 2, I'll switch over to LA time because LA people tend to work later and later at night and later in the morning. Like most people don't want to start till after lunch. So I do kind of base it on where my directors live.
Yeah.
And then just very crazy list. I just make lists and I have notifications on my iPhone that are like, you should probably switch over to this. And it's also timelines. Like you have to be really good with time management if you're an editor, hopefully already. But my calendars are like crazy and boundaries and like, and being honest with your project about you're not paying me a lot. So I have to have another Thrival job to pay the bills. So do I have 6 months for this feature film versus 4 months? So yeah, but just I have a whiteboard with all of my cuts that always are reminding me and sitting on my shoulder. And then I have calendar notifications and then I have iPhone notifications. And then me and my husband every morning sit down and he works from home also. He's a producer and we kind of plan out what our week looks like project wise. And that helps. Just having somebody to talk to makes it less crazy and hectic.
Right. No, I totally get that. And also, with editing, you have of course, when you get one project, there are 5 others that come in at the same time. And then you have to manage. But then all of a sudden, one will go away. Now you're waiting for notes. And then you're, working on that. And then this is complete. So it is kind of funny. It can be stressful at first. But then, you just got to breathe and go, but there'll be that, where it's like,
a waterfall.
Right.
Crazy. And now I'm breathing. And now I'm breathing. And once you are doing it for a while, you start to pick stuff that you love and are more interested in.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't seem like time management. You're like, oh, I get to work on the documentary after lunch. That's exciting. How do I get to the mood for that? Like, so that's the hardest part, I guess, is it's like with writers, like they tell writers to get into a habit of doing 10 pages every day, no matter how you feel, no matter the weather, no matter what stresses you're under. Same thing with editing. Like, you can't just wait till you feel like you want to edit. You just got to do it.
Yes, yes.
You know? So how do you switch between projects? Like right now I have a slasher that I'm doing, and then I'm also doing a Ukrainian documentary. So
very different.
Yes. So when I switch between the projects, I will just go watch a documentary. And, you know, I was just watching Errol Morris, The Fog of War, just to kind of get so good.
So good. Editing.
So good. Yes.
Brilliant. I was like, what?
I know. I just made my husband watch Burn in Florida, and he was like, I was like, I know, it's so good. So I will just switch into whatever, or I'll read a interview with a documentary film editor or director, just to change my brain over to thinking like that versus like I'm making a music video or, you know.
Right. I like that. And you must have your music library and special effects set up, because with everything you need to think about and do you have like now certain bins, like you're like, oh, horror, this is all my stuff for horror or something?
Oh, yes. I have I just actually had some time to take a hard drive and pull everything from all my work drives. Because usually I'll have like really fast work drives that I'll pull whatever my main projects are from whatever's been sent to me. And then I'm working off of. And then when they're done, I'll put them on an archive drive and clear up the work drive because it's faster. But I just took everything and made horror, sci-fi, which are closed, and did a bunch of music banks. But I also use a lot of online stuff. Like Motion Array is one of the best yearly libraries that I have access to. Soundstripe for pop music that are actually like really good bands and vocals and B-sides. So a lot of stuff now I'm keeping online in the cloud.
Right. Well, Artlist is good too.
I love Artlist.
I love their music.
Yes. So good.
Really good.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and you have to have like those subscriptions. Unfortunately, those subscriptions all add up. But, you know, there's so many things. Oh, I need that. Like I just got Film Impact.
Yes.
That's another amazing
game
one.
changer.
For transitions, and I also bought the sound effects with that too. So now I got to organize that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And everything gets better and better. Like even the Smithsonian released like a bunch of nature libraries for free for filmmakers to use. Like, so be in groups where you learn those things. And there's a lot of free resources. You don't have to always, I don't want to put editing behind like a paywall, you know, but there's lots of free options out there, or 1080p options. But if you can, buy the 4K ones and then download them and keep them, you know, and be smart about that.
Right. Yeah. So your latest feature film that's complete now, The Greatest Inheritance, I read what it's about and I was like, oh my God, this has got to be such a fun thing to cut. Can you tell us a little bit about what the project or what The Greatest Inheritance is about? And then how did you approach that project?
Yeah, for sure. I love The Greatest Inheritance. It is such a cute, fun project. A lot of times I edit things that I can't watch. I'll do a lot of horror films or stuff that my family doesn't care about. So I was really excited to get brought on to a family-friendly project that I could watch with my in-laws and my grandparents. My grandfather is 90. I was just really excited to have a family project to share when it was finished. I have worked with this group of filmmakers, Mustard Seed Entertainment, on 5 feature films. So this was our 5th, and actually we shot this at the height of COVID. Like the original wave of COVID that came through. It seems so far in my head now, but it was the first time having to shoot with mask on and getting COVID tested regularly. And it was before vaccines. Like it was when the film industry was trying to figure out how do we make content in this environment. It was super scary. But we have such a small team that has worked together for so long, we knew we could pull it off. So when I got brought on, they sent me the script and they were like, oh, we've edited, we've worked together before, read this new script. Do you think we can figure out a way to shoot this with as small amount of time with the actors together in the rooms as possible and stuff? Because you couldn't have as many people in takes before. And there was all these like A group was safe to be together, B group couldn't. So how could we shoot around? So they brought me on in pre-production. So me, the director, and the DP could figure out how to keep our talent safe. And if we needed to shoot one person on green screen or one person by themselves, like, could we insert them later? And Parasite had just won an Oscar, and he had just talked about how his editor, they had filmed several takes with the ensemble and then picked the best performances to rotoscope and matte in. So there are several scenes in Greatest Inheritance because of COVID that we are cutting in best performances and nobody knows. So that was really fun to plan out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So as an editor that knows visual effects, my director, John Katie Graham, who's amazing, knew he could come to me and we could plan that out and that we could pull it off and didn't have to worry about it.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you mind just telling us a little bit about what the story is?
Yeah, so The Greatest Inheritance, it's about a mother that passes away and her 4 children are estranged, and she hides her will on her property that they all grew up, and they have to band together and get along to find it. And so this group gets there and they are like terrible. You don't like any of them. And then throughout the story, you find out their history, what their beef is against each other. And then hopefully you're hoping that they can come together just to be a family again. You don't really care who wins the money, the inheritance, but by the end, you're rooting for everybody, which is my favorite kind of movie.
Yeah. I love that where you explore the depth of what's really going on, and I just love character and its character development, the arcs that will happen through time. So with that, how did you get onto that project? How did you find that?
So they came to me, I guess, in 2016. I have a friend, Helena Santos, and she is a brilliant actress, photographer. She does a lot of vlogging. She did Miss in the Biz, which was a female-based networking group in Hollywood for a while. I met her during the web series years, when everybody had a web series. And she reached out to me because she was interested in making a micro-budget feature where, kind of like the Duplass brothers, everybody owned a piece of it so that we could all make money at the end, make something good that we had control over, but then we kept it through the distribution process, because that's still a myth to control the rights to your film. So we made At Your Own Risk. So she came to me as the editor for this film, At Your Own Risk, and John Katie Graham and his partner Alexander Boylan were producing it, directing it, acting in it, writing it. So that was kind of all she wrote. We met at the 101, rest in peace. That was a wonderful cafe, swingers. And I met them and we just hit it off. And so they were like, do you want to come on? We need somebody that's going to do everything. Like credits. I was like, I don't do final sound mixes. So they're like, okay, we'll get a final sound guy. And the DP was coloring. So I was like, this sounds great. I just get to edit.
Yeah.
And we're shooting it in the desert, so there shouldn't be a ton of like things to work around. Remind me I said that later, as I had to paint in all the houses that showed up in the drone shots. And but yeah, so Helena brought me on to meet them, and they already owned Mustard Seed and had done a horror film, Home Sweet Home, and a Christian film called Catching Faith. So we did At Your Own Risk, and then we loved each other so much that they got greenlit for Catching Faith 2, a sequel to their first faith-based feature. And so I came on and even went to Kentucky and edited during that production. This is before the pandemic, and edited that film. And now I've done every film.
Wow.
And we're finishing one right now called Identity Crisis.
That's networking. I mean, once you get networking and connecting, networking, you could just network and nothing happens, but you have to connect to the people you're networking. And then I've heard that a lot, where once somebody likes you, they bring you onto all their films, which is great. Do you find yourself going on location to shoots and editing as they're cutting? Is this the normal?
I don't prefer it, but some scripts, I think it helps. Also, I think first-time directors, it helps. If, I love working with first-time directors because they don't know what we can't do. So they ask for stuff that they wouldn't know not to ask for, and that gets me excited. Because sometimes doing everything by the rules isn't fun.
Yeah.
So I like new directors because they kind of like push you to break the rules and see if you can work within that box. But normally they don't know how to edit. They haven't had a couple of features under their belt and like have the shorthand of what even editing looks like. They don't post is this scary thing that is a nebulous cloud. And I do suggest, if you can afford to have your editor come as a DIT. Normally you can't afford to have your editor there to edit, but you can have them there as a DIT, and then they can watch the dailies and they're prepping and they're like, hey, I don't think we can make this work without another shot. I think you should cover this with an insert,
Yeah.
I think that's a luxury, but if you can, I think it will save you money in post if you can have an editor on set.
Mm-hmm. Right. And as DIT, is that a different set of equipment? I mean, I know you have a laptop, and then, you're plugging in the external drives, making backups and everything. But do you have a monitor that shows, or do you just play it through your laptop?
I've done both. I've taken my whole system and set up in the production office, and then I've taken a laptop and I've been in the back of a car. So that's when you're like, how scrappy can I get? And sometimes you don't have a choice and you're operating off battery powered, like solar batteries, and just to watch it down. But if I can take my whole kit and set up, that's the best.
So what is your kit for DIT?
Just my whole computer.
Everything.
Yeah. And then really it's just your software that you're checking back to make sure your copies are working and having some kind of working knowledge of how to troubleshoot different systems. Really, it's just you've been doing it a long time and you recognize when a problem comes up. It's nice to have that person.
Yeah. And when you're copying from, doing the duplication, is it shot list or shot something? Is the software, do you use that, or do you use something else?
I have used that, and then a lot of times we're using red cameras, and so I will just use the red software to copy and make proxies for dailies and stuff. And sometimes I'll just make proxies for dailies, and then I'm still editing in the raw. So
yeah. Wow, that's and so then how did you work with John K.D. Graham? Did he come to your place, or did you send him files online? Like, how did that work?
So he actually was based in LA when they shot it. And then when he came back, he realized that because of the pandemic, LA rent, it's like really expensive to pay if you're not going to be like enjoying the city, you know? So he ended up moving. He's from New Mexico. And so he ended up moving back to New Mexico for our post-production. So we did everything online. And I think he did come into town. We had a couple of scenes to work on that we wanted to look through some of the older footage, some of the footage we weren't using. And I believe I sent him a hard drive, a copy of everything, and a master of my project so that he was actually looking at my project too. Now you can do that online. There's plenty of tools to do, like Jump Desk now, and Premiere Pro has a group sharing, and you can just send your project file off. It's mostly about just, do people have access to the media? And this was too big to put online at the time. Frame.io has definitely made strides in that, and other cloud-based, but these files are still huge. A hard drive, Jump Desk and a hard drive somewhere else has been the best way to save money on hard drives and still share projects. But I actually made a copy. This is 2019, 2020. I sent a copy of everything to him with exactly the copy of my project. This is how much we trust each other. A lot of editors won't show their work because that's some of your art. But I've worked with him so much that we were just both looking at it and then being like, oh, let's drop this in, and screen sharing. And he's a great director. He lets his people art as much as they want, and then he'll rein you in if it's outside the scope of the project. But
Right.
150% of the time, he's like, I love it, do that. And those are the best directors without
Yeah.
hurting the project, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Because they got to trust you for a reason. I always think like you have the writer who kind of in their head directed what this film's going to be. Then you have the director. They may be the same person. But then you have the editor. And that is another director. They're directing how they think the flow is going to go. So it is kind of interesting. I was just curious, like when you get a project in the hard drive, are you transferring all of that onto your hard drive, or do you work off of the hard drive that they
Again,
send?
that's kind of money and project dependent. I'll come on some projects and I'm like, okay, I need some hard drives for this. And people are like, that's not in the budget.
Well,
And I know, I'm like, well, then you should make a movie.
exactly.
So I will say, well, what do you have? Or I'm coming on after they've shot and they've hired me and they've already archived it on a Western Digital like storage drive for photos. And they're like, I can't watch it. I'm like, nobody can watch it on that.
Yeah.
So for those projects, I do have a floating work drive that I will pull everything on. And SSD drives or travel drives are great now too. Like if you have a smaller project and it's like 4 terabytes, those little SSDs drives are fantastic to work off. They're super fast. And so I have a bunch of those laying around too. But for the most part, I'm going to ask you to buy me $7,000 to $10,000 in drives for your feature film. And I'm going to send over and I'll try to get discounts and I'll try to send a coupon and I will try to help keep the budget low. But this is your baby.
Yeah.
You know, and I need to have a master copy that I can edit. I need to have a backup storage copy. I need to have travel drives to send to the colorist. That's also fast. I need a SSD drive to send to the sound guy. So I do come in with like a laundry list of, I need like 8 drives and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're either paying for it or I'm paying for it. And if I'm paying for it, I'm keeping them.
Right. Exactly. Well, and what would you recommend that they get?
I love the OWC RAID drives. Hi, Kat.
Okay.
I had to shut the door so mine didn't hear us because she would be up here. Yeah, so OWC RAID drives are the best. I think I'm doing RAID 5 on my drives now just because they automatically back everything up for you. And if one fails, Soft RAID is a program that comes with those that kind of like checks them. I also do Disk Courier regularly on all my drives. I don't know if people use that regularly, but it makes sure your ones and O's match on your drive still because you are just dealing with such levels of metadata and data when you're editing that, you know, let's say you should always have your electricity where you're plugged in and it's rerouted so your electricity never goes out, but God forbid your electricity goes out and your hard drive gets booted.
Yeah.
And so I will run Disk Courier on it and it just kind of cleans up the software in the background. But I've used that for 10 years and it's kept my drives, knock on wood.
Oh, that's
in
great.
Shape. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know because everybody's got something different that they use, and that's what I always like to ask because you're always going to learn something new.
It's saved my butt 1,000 times. Like I even have friends that'll be on set and it'll be a different editor and they're like, we lost a hard drive. And I'm like, drop it by the house and I'll run some test. And Disk Courier always, 90% of the time, saves it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that from way back in the day. I don't use it anymore, but I'm going to have to look it up now that you said
and
that.
they just had a new update. I'm still going with it.
Oh, that is so awesome.
No sponsors.
Yeah, and how long okay, let's just say that you have to use your computer. How long do you keep people's projects for? When do you start?
Forever.
Really?
Yeah, I keep everything. You just never know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I could be 90 and they want to do a documentary about me and I'll be like, I have everything. There you go. But I definitely every year, because hard drives have gotten better.
And they're cheaper too, some.
I even have like 300 millibyte hard drives still from like early editing.
Wow.
But now I will get 18 terabytes and have all my projects. But yeah, I keep them. I should work in charging some level of archiving, but I just do it. I do it more to protect myself.
Yeah.
Than anything, because I'll have movies that are, sometimes you'll sell to distribution and they have it for 3 years, and then 3 years later they come and they're like, hey, we think we could sell this again or go to distribution with another streamer if we change the title. And so the next thing you know, or we just, one of our films went to a faith-based distribution company and they wanted to cut a few words out that their audience wasn't going to be stoked about. So I had to go back in and find the audio. They paid me to fix it, because otherwise, and I spliced it together, we would have had to gone back to our audio person from 5-7 years ago and been like, do you still have these stems and stuff? So it would have been like redelivering everything again. So I kept everything.
Yeah, so you keep everything, all the audio, all the video. So you don't just like go, okay, here's the final film, and that's all I have. It's everything that was okay.
Yep, I have a backup archive project drive for everything. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So over like 200 projects at this point. My husband is like, oh my God, please stop.
I know, they become Art Deco in the house. So it's just like color coded. I don't know.
So definitely, I definitely have stacks of hard drives all in my in my office. I tried to hide most of them, but my office is just G drives, and I'm sure another editor would be like, and I'm like, I know, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, as an editor, there's so much responsibility. I feel like you have to think about, like, every time I'm cleaning up my drives, I'm thinking, should I just dump this? Like, why am I still holding on to this? But,
And I'm nostalgic too.
Yeah.
Like, I like to go back and be like, oh man, I thought about, like, on Instagram starting to release like my first videos from like 2003 and just being like, oh, this is what I learned from this, or blah 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 blah. How do you share besides doing podcasts like this, which I love that you do this, how do you share your knowledge? Like pay grades. I think all of that should be shared amongst all of us.
And I like that you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, what's the range that a feature film editor, independent, can make? And like, what should they start out at? Or
so, oh man, when you are making the switch to your first independent feature film, hopefully you've been assisting other people, and we're making hopefully $1,500 a week, $1,250 to $1,500 a week. There's LA rates, there's Georgia rates, there's New Orleans rates, I don't live anywhere near film rates, but hopefully they're a living wage.
Yeah.
But when you do get that first feature film, since most people aren't going to give a new person unvetted a chance, you end up not getting paid a lot for the first couple, between 5 to 10.
$1,000 total?
Yeah. And
okay.
It was a flat rate based on whatever. The first thing I do is I ask you what your budget is. And then if you're in Blue Collar Post group on Facebook, which a lot of editors and post people are, every year they do a rate scale. And you can also go to the union website and plug in and kind of see what the union version is of your scale. So I think for like an under $1 million, you're supposed to be making like $4,600 a week as an editor, or 30.
Wow.
Yeah, it's way higher than I've ever been able to talk them into. For the most part, because it's indie though, you can do a flat rate, and then if the scope of the project changes, you get some kind of additional change in your contract and paid for it. Like, let's say, I just edited a feature film that was $30,000 for it was an $800,000 feature. I got paid $30 flat for 3 months, and then they needed some skin work. So then I was able to go in and say, if you pay me for 2 additional weeks, I'll paint out all these skin blemishes. So definitely have in your contract, even if you get paid a decent flat rate, that if the scope of the project changes, then you can't work on it forever, even if you love it or are proud of the project. You have to still eat. So find a way to work in your contract. If the scope changes, I'm going to get paid more. So I will do a flat rate 75% of the time. And then there's other folks that I've worked with and they take longer.
Yeah.
So I usually do a weekly rate with them. And so the first cut I will charge a bulk rate, a flat rate for of like 12 grand for this first cut. And then when you're ready to work on it, we'll go by a weekly rate.
So let's talk about contracts. So you're working on a film, you get a contract from them. What do you look for in the contract? And an editor should know.
You look how they're breaking up your pay scale. So have you guys decided to do a flat rate? And if you were doing a flat rate, do you have a cutoff time? Is it a flat rate for 3 months, for 4 months, through delivering to distribution? What does that flat rate cover? Do you change scope of projects? So like you decided at the beginning of the project, I'm only going to edit 3 cuts for you so I can control notes and this doesn't go forever. If it goes past that, you put in your contract, I get paid more because the scope of the project and what we originally discussed about has changed. And then if it's a low budget project or a passion project or a project that you're deferred on or you know is going to do well later on, probably make sure you get back endpoints because there's so many projects that you are going to be spending your lifeblood on and like a year of your life. And you're barely paying the bills because you love the project, but there's not a lot of money. At the end of the project, you should get paid a bonus for that. So I always try to work back end points on low budget. So like, especially if you don't have distribution already. Some projects come to you and they already have distribution and then you really don't have a say in that. But if somebody brings a $1 million project to me or a $300,000 project to me and they don't know where it's going to go, but they have these lofty plans or it's going to go to big film festivals, try to negotiate for some kind of payment once it sells.
I like that. So that would be like the back end points would be like a flat fee, or I get a percentage of everything you make.
Kind of like streaming rights for actors. Like for a while there, actors were making so much money because their shows were being shown on TBS. So you could have been a 1 episode of The Office and you're still getting like $1,000 a year every time that airs. It's the same kind of situation. Like if you buy this movie, I'm a department head, usually the DP, the editor, the director and the producers all will share some percentage of whatever the end game looks like for the movie. Because everybody hopes their movie gets bought by Netflix or HBO and you get a nice, paycheck. I do know that like Zendaya and the Duplass brothers, they always split their profit with their cast and crew. Always.
Wow. That's really great.
I just think that should it's a team sport. That's how it should be.
Right. Yes. And then do you create the contract or the contract's created for you and then you're just going through it to make sure that it hits those points?
Usually I get the contract sent over to me and then I will send it to, depending on what your interaction is with the creative team or the producers or if you've worked with them before, I suggest always sending it to your lawyer and just making sure, even if you have somebody that you just hire for like reviewing your contracts, that's like, $100 to review your contract, and just make sure all the wording's right and that you're protected and that you're not missing. They're all pretty standard when they come over, but it's really just those dates and how many cuts and scope. And then, if your back end points are based on the profits, who gets paid first, just make sure that none of the language is actually screwing you.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. So let's just ask this question is that, okay, so you're brought on or you're asked to do the project. Can you just walk us through the steps before you actually edit? So somebody says, hey, Lex, I'd like you to edit my feature film. And then what's the first thing? Okay, I get a script first. Then I do this all before you're actually editing. What are those steps?
Yeah, so for me, somebody sends me an email, a query, and just asks me if I'm interested in their project. Usually they'll send me a log line. And I'll say, oh, that sounds interesting, or I've worked with you before, or I know you through another friend. Send me your script. And send me an NDA with your script.
Right.
Or send me any of your pitch materials, and they'll send me that. And then I'll say, oh, I like this script. I think this could be fun. When are you shooting this? Because some projects never shoot. Some
Why?
projects don't have money yet, or people are hiring you before that process. So that's the next thing I ask is, when are we shooting this? What's our schedule? Because most editors are booked 3 to 6 months in advance. So I'll have people that come to me with a contract and they're like ready to start next week. And I'm like, oh, no, I have no time, or I just don't have any availability. So really go to your first choice editors 3 to 6 months, even if you're not bringing them on for pre-pro. Like, you want to lock in way before you shoot, because we book because features take 6 months, 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
And then I like to meet. I prefer in person over dinner. I prefer to break bread with somebody I'm fixing to sign a contract with. I feel like you're less likely to screw somebody over if you've had to see them in person. And plus, you can see how they interact with the waitress, the host, other people on the party. You just it's like the first time you're going to kind of see their love language with communication and see if you're a good fit. I don't tell them this is happening. I'm hoping they're doing the same to me.
Yeah.
When we're having coffee. And then if you can't have coffee, Zoom is an awkward way to kind of do it. But it's not the same. It's not the same as meeting somebody in person and seeing their body language. Zoom, we're kind of like a first date. We're all dressed up. We're on our best, for most Zooms, you're putting your best foot forward. So I like to meet them in person. And then if that all goes well, I say, send me the contract. And then usually the line producer will reach out and we'll go through, this is my weekly rate. Are we doing it as a flat rate? If it's a flat rate, do you have a post schedule? Because I can't give you a flat rate for this could never end schedule. Right. And then if not, then you build a post schedule, even if it's just for you to kind of reference for how long you think the project will go. And
how do you come up with that? How do you come up with the post schedule? What are you thinking of?
Mine's usually just based on what I've been doing. So if I know it's little to no visual effects, I know that I can have a rough cut out in 3 weeks.
Okay.
And that's post it being all organized. So the actual editing. So usually if they don't do it on set, 2 weeks for organizing it and syncing it, making dailies, 3 to 4 weeks for a rough cut, depending on how much footage they shoot. They could shoot for 25 days and you only needed 18 days or 15 days, really.
Right.
And, so I guess it's also dependent on how much footage they shoot. If it's 2 cameras, because a lot of people will shoot 2 cameras, but they don't know how to shoot 2 cameras. And then you have all this B footage that you can't use. So do you even organize that? So kind of figuring those things out just naturally from having done it. And then after that point, it's really dependent on notes. And you're really trying to just light a fire under the producers and directors to have feedback.
Right, yeah.
That usually takes the longer than the actual editing, is figuring out what their opinion is now that they're seeing it in real life.
Right, yes.
So that's how the weekly rate will come in, is sometimes people are like, I know I take a month. I need a month of like staring at the project to make notes. And you have to practice giving notes. It's like your friend sending your script and then it's like, can you give notes? And you're like, that's hard. That's a job. That's a skill set. So giving notes on the cuts, that kind of can inflate time. So sometimes being paid per cut is nice too. You make sure in your contract that they can't go to somebody else. Right. That you're still on contract for the next cut, but that might not be at the same time on indie projects. It's really dependent on the directors and the producers being nailed down. Some people are great, but those are the people that's not their first film.
Right.
So.
Okay. Oh, I like that. And do you get that money up front?
So I usually try to get 50% up front. And then 25% after the director's cut, and then 25%, the final 25% when I deliver to sound and color.
Okay. And then at that point, are you completing this film so sound and color come back to you and then you do the final, or does somebody else?
Sometimes color does it, but a lot of times I do, just because in the nature of the project, you're still finishing credits. You're still doing other stuff that's not finished. So usually it does come back to me, and then I will get like a weekly rate to deliver to distribution. So, and that
Okay.
might be less than my editor's rate. So I'll have an editor's rate that's for creative work. And then if I really love you, I might give you like a assistant editor just to do tech work for a week, because I'm not trying to, we're all trying to make movies for no money over here. So I get that. So
Right.
there's some level of I'm doing assistant work and pay me an assistant rate. Now I'm paying editing, and you're paying for my taste and my style. That's a higher rate. And then, oh, here's some tech work. I'm sure other people have different arguments for how they charge, but I work with a lot of the same people.
Right. So with a flat rate, I can understand that. A weekly rate, do you typically, is it them telling you like, okay, I'm going to hire you for 4 weeks to do this or 8 weeks? And then do you know, based on the length of the project, how long, so that you can just go, okay, this is a 6-week for me to cut this? Or
Yeah,
how does that work?
I will read the script, and then I'll ask the line producer if they have a post schedule yet, and usually it's a no. And then I will put together a little mock post schedule based on other feature films I've edited that are similar. So like if it's one camera and is improv and was a 10-day shoot, that might end up being a more problematic edit.
Yes.
Because you
Yeah.
don't know what to go to, but in theory it shouldn't be if the director knows what they're doing, if the team knows what they're doing. So that would be my cheapest. Now, something that has 3 cameras and a lot of visual effects and a lot of social media, which is what I get a lot. A lot of people write social media just naturally into their scripts. And I'm like, how are we going to show that?
Right.
Because you can't just show over the shoulder on the phone anymore. Like after Sherlock came out, nobody wants to see a phone or a screen, So stuff was searching. That movie came out and everything was on the computer and shot.
Yep.
But that doesn't look good to shoot on the computer. So do you have a graphics person? What speed are you shooting in? So those things I have to kind of break down in the script, especially if I'm the visual effects person too. And then
Do you get more for that?
Yeah, so I itemize out the visual effects, which will be completely separate from my edit. Because I don't even want to, I'll put in timing, temp stuff, but I want to be able to concentrate. I mean, I'm thinking, how can I do this as I'm editing? But I try to put that so I can look at it with fresh eyes when I'm just doing visual effects. Otherwise, you have to compartmentalize your creativity,
Right.
And it's just a different job.
Yeah, and I would think with special effects, you have to, as you're editing it, you have to be thinking about what do I need for that special effects to happen.
Especially the timing, which will be weird for somebody watching if there's not a temp in the cut. Because the brain has to be able to see it, And like the eye, that's why 24 frames per second is what we use for film, because it's the slowest the eye can like take in and think about as an idea. So you have to have it come in and read it, and then it goes off for text messages, and people are like, oh, that scene's too long, and I'm like, well, everybody reads differently,
right?
So those are things you kind of gotta take in. It's always a timing thing, but
yeah,
it's fun trying to get those past QC and notes, because you're like, trust me, people are gonna be like, I can't read that, it's too fast,
Right. Yeah. So is all that's all done in special effects? There's no app that you are plug-in that you use for text messages?
I have like a set of motion array templates for like basic Apple or iPhone text, but I really tell people like, have something cool about this. Like I just saw that movie Spirited around Christmas with Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds, and he had some cool like videos popping down from the top, and I was just like, oh, it's always nice to see a cool way that people are integrating social media, because it's such a part of humans' lives now.
Yep.
And so I try to tell people, how do we make this interesting? People have seen this. So if you're going to write social media into your film, have it be in a cool way, and you can figure that out afterwards, but it'd be nice to have a plan going in too. So I basically will start with a temp, and then hopefully creatively we'll come up with a cool idea that I can build from scratch.
I like that. Yeah. And when you're flowing in the edit, what do you, just intuitively, probably like you're watching something, you're like, okay, this now needs a close up. this needs this angle, like, because especially if they're doing 3 or 4 different angles, what is your thought process when you're watching it to know which one you should go in versus another? Or is
Uh,
it just
it's a gut instinct. It's what do I feel I want to see as the viewer? What am I feeling about this moment in the scene? Do I want to see this person's reactions? Do I want to see this person's eyes? Is this person doing something with their hands that I feel like are taking us out of it that I need to hide? Are they changing geography that is taking people out of it because it's too abrupt? Or do I want to do that because of the emotion in the scene? I want to make everybody kind of be like, oh, that was weird. Do I want to kind of like show my cards? Really, it's all feeling and
Yeah.
just watching movies my entire life. And so there's just some common language that we expect in a film because we're pretty well trained humans now on TV and movies. So if you're going to do something really weird or break the rules, have a reason.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. I was thinking about that, like, as I watch films and I watch how did they set up the scene? How many shots did they get? How many different angles? And I find that fascinating. And especially when you're editing, you're like, oh, something just took me out. Something's wrong with this cut,
Yep.
It is kind of fun. Yeah. that then when you finally, have somebody see your final film, they're not thinking about everything that you
are tracking.
Right. And put into this to make it flow, to make it well seen,
And people also don't know what you had.
Yes.
Which is, I think, interesting about our art form is like, it's really a team sport.
Yes.
So that's what's interesting about, I think, the editor is you just don't know. And I'm sure the DP hates the editor because they're like, why did you cut our shots? Or,
right.
So it's interesting. I love doing the commentaries on the film when you're done with the team.
Yeah. And they should bring in the editor. They usually bring in the director
and the producers.
Right. But what about the editor? The editor is the one that said, yeah, well, the reason I took this was because of, X, Y, and Z. You're going to know
too
more.
much. We know
yeah,
too
probably.
much.
Yeah. We don't want to hear about that. We don't want to hear about the problems. No, I get that. Yeah. So when you're meeting somebody for dinner so would you prefer dinner over coffee or which one do you pitch first? And then is it the producer or are you meeting with the director or both?
I like to meet with both because I think producers are more involved than you think they're going to be, even if they're not hands-on, even though they're producers are such a invisible job. They get the money, they have an opinion, they bring people together, they're going to help you sell it. They're going to help you with advertising. But in terms of the editor, you're trying to gauge how much the producer's going to be in your life.
Right.
Because if in theory, I'd only want to talk to the director. Right. And the director talks to the producers so that I'm protected in some way. But that doesn't always happen. So I do like to meet, and a lot of times the producer is bringing me on because they're connecting people that are good. So a lot of times I already know the producer.
Okay.
So it just makes sense to have like your friend in common there too.
Yeah.
But I like to just spend time with the director too. And like I said, I prefer dinner because I get to see how they interact with other people, whereas coffee, they could already have it and then there's no interaction. But dinner, you have to see them, just see who they are. It's a little bit like a date or speed dating.
No, I think that I never thought about that, how they interact with staff. And that's a big telltale there.
Because they're romancing you because they're trying to hire you. But as soon as they walk into your edit bay, you work for them.
Right. Yeah. And then I'm just curious, who typically pays for this dinner? I mean, do you go Dutch or?
I usually do. I usually try to like sneak a card so I can be like, I don't need anything. It takes you back to that. I don't need anything from you. We are equal. You're not doing me any favors. This is equal footing. We are both equal creatives, even though you're the director. So I try to sneak in by the first meal so that there's no power exchange. I don't want to lose any of my power because I'm like, oh, I can't say no because they bought dinner.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, oh, thank you for meeting me. I got this first one. Hopefully it's the first of many kind of situations. And then if it's somebody that I usually only do this with people I haven't worked with before.
Right.
So,
yeah.
and I'm usually requesting it. So I do buy because I don't want to make somebody come out in LA all the way to me in Atwater. And then I'm like, $100 meal.
Yeah.
You know, so I do try to pick it up and I count that into kind of my networking budget that I have throughout the year.
And then what kind, I know this is really specific, but like dinner joint, what is the expense that you're going to take them to?
First, I ask them if they like if they want to have a drink or if they want like more of like a lunch situation. Like, what's your time look like? Because some people are so busy that they only have time for a quick pop-in lunch. And then we'll just go to like Morrison's down the street, which is like a $50 meal, you know? But if they say drinks and there's like a new cool place to go to that's like artsy, I'll use that as an excuse to go and treat myself as well.
Yeah.
And plus you're having like you're creating good memories with that person in hopes that you do work with them. And that when you're going through hard times and you're fighting about dropping a scene, that you're like, remember how much fun we had at dinner that one time?
Right. I love that.
So you have a good memory to pull from, which is nice in relationships, to have good stuff and not conflict. So I do try to build relationships. We don't have to be friends. I don't need to be in your wedding, but I want to be able to call you if there's a problem and have an honest discussion. And I think breaking bread together helps those relationships in that way.
And then what is your love language and what's a compliment? Like what people have you worked with and their love language?
My love language is I prefer people to be as honest as possible. I don't want my feelings to be taken in. I want people to not waste my time. I don't like doing stuff twice. I don't like inefficiency. I want people to be like, I'm hiring this person, but their time is important. So that's my love language, is just somebody that sees that I'm going the extra mile for their baby. Because when this movie's over, nobody's asking who the editor was unless it's like something flashy. And I like that. I don't want to be a director. I don't want to be the person that's doing the Q&A at the front of the theater. I like to sit in the back with my cocktail and cheer everybody else on.
Right.
So my love language is definitely just people appreciating my time and being grateful, even if things aren't going well. Like, I see you. And then I love email. I love email because you can track everything and search through it. And sometimes text, I'm like, I have 4 years of text with you with like pictures. And they're like, I said, so that's I prefer communication about the project on email.
Right. Yeah, I know these days it's like somebody Facebook's messaged me. I'm like, why don't you just email me? I don't know why now I got to go into this platform to
I don't even have Messenger. Yeah.
Right. It's like, or text. And you're right. With text, then it's like I could delete the text. And now, you sent me the link in the text. Why didn't you just send? Yeah, I'm the same way. I prefer email. I don't know why more people just don't email everything, because at least then you can get on your computer and look back. Text is on your phone.
Yep, it's just more work.
Yeah.
Just make it easy.
Yeah.
Time is so important. Time in LA goes by so much faster than other places. I can't ever explain that to people. I'm like, so time is important. And also the pressure of text. Like, if I'm editing for a 10-hour workday, I get 100 texts. I can't respond to everyone, but I feel that pressure as a people pleaser to respond. So when people text me, then I start getting into my head, they're annoying. Or they're interrupting my flow because I'm working, so I don't really know how to fix that for society to have like, I like that people will silence their notifications and have that notification on their phone now. Because I'm like, oh, you're in a movie. Yay, or something, and that lets me know, like, I'm not going to respond right away. Like, your phone shouldn't be a leash.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel that way when directors are overly texty. Or don't text me notes. If I send out a draft that I just worked my butt off and it's Friday night at 10, I'm done for the weekend. Don't send me like scene 3 notes. I'm going to be like, I am ignoring you because I finished this and now my brain needs to take a break. So I do try to kind of be like, hey, when I send out a cut, I don't want you can say thumbs up. I loved it. I can't wait for us to talk about it. But I don't want notes via text at midnight.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. Well, notes via text, period. I think they all should go in an email because you're on your computer. You don't want to be looking on your phone to go, where is that note? You know,
and they change too. Like, this could have been cut 2. And I'm like, dang it, I'm doing a draft 2 note. Yeah. I use Google Docs extensively for notes too. And then the directors can work on them when they want to, and then I can be working on parts. And so I do try to set up a scene-by-scene spreadsheet when I edit for me and the director to have ideas on.
Love it. Yeah. Google Docs is the best.
It's the best.
I mean,
I don't need anything else.
Yeah. Now it just needs that storage to be really huge. I mean, you know, you have to pay for it, but like then you could just send everything up there.
Yep. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
With it.
But they just need to have notes within the video. That you still have to go to Frame.io or Vimeo. Yeah. To other platforms.
Which are annoying.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I won't even say my horror story of one of them. But yeah, no, I live and learn. Yeah. Yes. But it's so great that we can do things virtually. So I love it. And I love the, you know, just being able to be creative together.
Yeah, me too. And hopefully more people are going to get opportunities in LA. Like, you know, I'm stoked for other cities to be filmmaking communities, you know, and not feeling like you have to be in Los Angeles, because I would love to be close to my family again in Florida, but post-production is just not, even though it's remote, it's still very LA based.
Yeah. I was just thinking, though, with the remote, it is kind of cool that you could work on any project. I was working with an East Coast company, and they would just put everything online. I download it. It was TikTok video, so it was different. But, you know, that's easy enough to just do from anywhere.
Oh, yeah. TikTok has opened up a whole new avenue for editors. Like, it's so cool. Like, I love that this exists. I tell people when I mentor college students, I'm like, every company needs an editor. It's not just filmmaking. Like, you know, everybody needs filmmakers. So
how do you do your mentor? Do you have a program, or is it just people you meet?
I have a lot of people that reach out to me, a lot of females that I've done panels on my movies at screenings, and they've seen me and been like, I didn't know a girl could edit. And I'm like, what rock do you live under? Come out from under it. Or they thought they could only be makeup artists. And I'm like, I know a lot of men makeup artists and hair. Like, so that's been interesting me the last 5 years, that it's mostly been females that want to edit or do TikTok or do music videos or do YouTube, and they're like, how do I make this into a career? And they're all in like communications and expected to go into advertising. And I'm like, you can edit for your advertising firm. Like, you literally can edit for any company now. So like, you just got to figure out what you want to do. What's your purpose, you know? And so, so I do it they'll reach out via email or Instagram. And then we'll have Zoom coffee dates. And then at one point I had like 18 mentees. Wow. And I was it was taking up too much of my time. I wanted to help. So I ended up doing like a symposium where I had a bunch of people and they could just ask me questions. And I'll always watch down people's work. I'll always give notes and feedback. I'll be a cheerleader. I'll say, what do you want? Do you want me to like, you know, pump you up, or do you really want feedback? Yeah. You tell me what you want.
Oh, that's really cool. Now, do you charge for that, or you're doing this? Oh, that's really sweet.
I wish somebody would have done it for me. I wish somebody would still do it for me.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's so awesome. I think mentorship is, you know, and sometimes I think we're just afraid to ask, but people are so willing, and connection is just really reaching out. That's the hardest part, is just taking the first step of reaching out.
Yep. And know your questions. Yeah. Like, really have questions.
Yes.
And then I will give you as much time as possible, but I'm probably not going to sit on a Zoom and just be like, yeah.
Right.
Like, when you ask somebody for their time, be specific, I guess, in the industry. I think more people say yes to giving time than no. People want to help. People want to talk about themselves, even if we don't admit it, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's so awesome. That's really great. So tell me, are there any projects that you're working on now that you'd like to talk about or mention?
I have a couple of cool things coming out, hopefully, this year that are finishing up. Suffer. We have a wonderful team that I work with, Carrie and Nick. They are a husband and wife director-writer team that wrote a survivalist feminist fantasy movie that they shot in Idaho. And they came to me. It's a micro-budget project, but a lot of artisans wanted to do something not about the pandemic during the pandemic. So
Right.
we all came together kind of like at your own risk and have all been really adding to this feature film that we've been working on. And so they're in visual effects right now, doing the fantasy portion. So I haven't seen anything since I handed over the edit. So I'm actually really excited because I usually don't get to take a break, you know, but he's a visual effects guy for Netflix. So I was like, I get to hand this over to someone else. So we have a colorist and the composer working on it. So I'm actually really excited to see what they're coming up with. Because like I said, I usually do all of that. So that was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was I was like, I just get to edit. Okay. Are you sure? So that's happening. So I'm really excited. They're Doth Goats films. I'm excited to see that. And then I'm editing a slasher out of Atlanta, Georgia called The Legend of Gilbert Flay. And it's about a killer that comes after you if you have hate in your heart. So I think that's an interesting concept of like how you know that or like how do they figure that out. So that's a really fun group of people. The DP is fantastic. The director's really kind and just has been a blessing to work with. So I'm excited to see how that happens. And we are on the first fine cut. So I actually have that going out next week. So I'm excited.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and horror is a different breed, kind of like action adventure, I think, a little bit, because it's a fast cutting, especially when it gets really scary.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And so we're at that point where we're still figuring out our structure on a couple of things. We're moving some stuff around. And then I call it the razzle dazzle. So I was like, we're not actually at razzle dazzle yet. Or coming up with like, what's our style going to be? Is it going to be like Candyman? Is it going to be like flashing in? Are we just going to keep it cinematic? So we are fixing to move into that aspect of the editing. So I'm pretty excited. We've been sending each other stuff and being like, did you see this? Or this is cool. And also, how do you come up again with something that people haven't seen before? Or it's his first feature film. Do we stick with something that people have seen before? Because that's a safe way. Because people are like, oh, I know that's a horror. This is a horror movie, you know, or do we get big? So that's fun about this creative process. So I'm excited about that. And then have some documentary stuff that I'm working on. And yeah, some big projects hopefully at the end of the year that I don't think I'm allowed to talk about yet, but hopefully send good vibes.
Yes,
I think that's going to be cool. Something out of my normal, normally what I edit. So I'm excited to kind of step outside. I still try to scare myself. If I'm not scared, it's probably not worth it, you know?
Right.
So this is one of those that I'm kind of scared, but I'm like, okay, let's see where that goes.
Well, you know you can do it because you're the one that said, when you got your first gig as the special effects, yeah, I can do it. I think sometimes that's half the battle, right? Is you just have to, you know that YouTube University is out there. So all you do, and I think that's the best way to learn because when I had to get on Premiere, I didn't know it. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to do a TikTok on Premiere. It happened to be about Premiere. So that was interesting. So as he's like, tip number 1, I'd be like looking up, how do you do that? And then I'd come back. But I think that that's just the way that you learn it the quickest. So in a week, I had Premiere down because I was constantly doing this and this until I got the shortcuts.
Trial by fire.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that that's kind of the cool thing is to keep yourself out of your comfort zone. That's the best way because you're going to learn the most.
I agree totally. Yeah. Like I said, if I feel safe, it'll be a good paycheck, but I'm at the point in my career where I want to get something creative out of it.
Yeah.
It's not just a paycheck. Yeah.
Exactly. So, can you leave our listeners with any words of advice, to our editors that might want to get into feature film editing, what they should think about?
I think the biggest advice I can give new editors is to meet directors, make friends with directors. I normally do not push for a traditional school, going to film school, but I do think it is a good place to meet directors that you can pair up with and develop a relationship in a shorthand, because that makes making films so much easier if you're working with your friends or people you respect. If you don't go to college for film, I suggest just getting out there and doing like 48-hour film festivals and meeting directors. I also think that if you have a film festival in town or nearby, go and do all of the networking events. People want to meet you and not think you need something from them.
Right.
They want to they want to meet you and you're a fan of their work or rooting for them, or you have something in common, and then they will call you when they have a project. So networking, but without asking for anything, I think is very important for new filmmakers, because it's hard you need to get paid and you need to have a reel, but how do you not come off needy?
Right.
Which is hard. It's a balance.
Yeah. And I was thinking that it's like, what can you do for them, not what they can do for you. So kind of be thinking about that. What, like you have, special effects. So you could be like, if you ever need that, I mean, I'd be happy to, consult with you, or, just anything that they could help them.
Learning a new skill. Like my biggest thing that I learned this year, and I got a lot of clients doing it during the pandemic, was building pitch decks. And so I got to meet directors and kind of help develop projects I was excited about. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I can make pitch decks. I'm an editor. I work in Photoshop. It's the same thing. It's still visually storytelling. It's just actually easier because it's just pictures. So I learned that skill to meet more directors.
Wow. So then they pay you to do their pitch deck?
Yep. And then hire me when we get money.
Oh my God, that's great. I didn't even think about that. Now, are you working in Canva? How do you do your pitch decks?
So I like Canva, but I still build everything in Photoshop from scratch.
Okay. Wow.
And then
but do you have a template?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope. I've just been doing it for a while. I have a template that I know what a pitch deck looks like.
Right, yeah.
And I have different versions that I have for that. But in terms of the art and everything, that's all from scratch.
So you create it in Photoshop as a JPEG, then you bring it in to Canva with the color background and just put the picture.
Yep. So I'll build I'll build the backgrounds, and then I will do like a temp text area, and then I'll pull the backgrounds into Canva and then do a new text so that my clients can change it.
Okay, got it.
As they need it.
Wow, that is really cool.
It's been pretty fun.
Yeah.
Less stress.
Yeah. No. And it just tells you how many different ways you can sell yourself. You do editing, you do SFX, and then you do pitch decks. What else do you do?
A bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. Right.
I film too. I DP, and I'll come out and do proof of concepts with people. Like I said, I've leaned more into development because I want to do projects. I want to see projects out in the world that I want to see, that I'm an audience of. So that's why I've kind of veered into that post-COVID, because COVID's a whole new wild, wild west. I think anybody has a chance to do what they want in this industry. Like,
right.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This was great.
Yeah, I could do this anytime. Obviously, we could talk for hours.
Right. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram @TammyMcGarrow. Until we meet again, what's your story?